Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Winnebago County Board meeting. Tonight is Thursday, August 24th, 2023. Tonight's invocation and pledge of allegiance is going to be by Board Member John Butita. Please stand.
Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance and wisdom and support as we begin this meeting. We gather today together with the intent to do a good work, and we seek to represent fairly and well those who have given us this task. May our efforts tonight be blessed with your insight, guided by your understanding and compassion for our fellow man. Please, God, we ask you now to watch over all those who defend our freedom and our public safety, shield them from harm, guide them in all their pursuits. As your trusted servants, we seek your blessings on our deliberation and on our efforts here tonight. May we act wisely and well. Amen.
Amen.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Butita. Mr. Thompson, are there any adjustments to the agenda tonight?
Just one, Mr. Chairman, under appointments for the ETSB Board. It's a 3-year term, and the term would expire April 30th, 2026, rather than 2027.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk Gummo, can you please call the roll?
Certainly. Thank you, Chairman. Just a reminder to everyone, please speak in the direction of your microphone. We will start with Mr. Tassoni. Mr. Thompson. Here. Mr. Webster. Here. Mr. Arena. Here. Mr. Booker. Present. Mr. Butita.
Here.
Mrs. Crosby. Ms. Fellers.
Present.
Mrs. Gorel.
Present.
Mr. Guevara.
Present.
Ms. Hansard.
Here.
Mr. Hoffman.
Present.
Mr. Lindmark.
Present.
Mr. McCarthy.
Present.
Mr. McDonald.
Present.
Mr. Neighbors. Mr. Penny.
Here.
Mr. Salgado. Mr. Scroll.
Here.
Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
Thank you all, Mr. Chairman. That is 17 board members present, 3 board members absent.
Very good. Thank you. We do have a quorum this evening. Ms. Hansard?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Just to notice that, to let you guys know that our fellow board member, Tim Neighbors, has lost his aunt. Her services will be this Saturday, so please keep him and his family in prayer. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have one presentation this evening by our Assessor Tom Hodges. He's going to overview the updated property assessment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chris?
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you all this evening as we discuss the fairly significant increase that we've seen in the assessed values for the 2023 tax year. I'm hoping to be somewhat brief and move through this at a pretty good clip. I would be happy to answer any questions after the presentation is over. The goals, my goals for this presentation are to answer the following questions. 1, why are assessed values increasing? 2, what is the correlation between assessed values and property tax liability? And 3, what recourse do property tax owners in Winnebago County have if they feel that they are being overassessed? A quick note, this presentation focuses exclusively on non-farmland assessment. Farmland assessment in Illinois is assessed differently. It's assessed based on the productivity of the soil and the potential to generate income. So as we all know, we're taxed, we pay property taxes in Illinois based on the value of our real estate that we own. This is known as ad valorem taxation. And one of the ways that the law ensures that this is being met is through the statutory median assessment level being required to be set for each county at 33 1/3%. Every time a property is conveyed for a monetary consideration, a real estate transfer declaration is recorded with the county recorder's office. That data off of that document is used by our office, by the township assessors, as well as by the Illinois Department of Revenue to perform sales ratio studies. And what these sales ratio studies tell us is the median assessment level of a given jurisdiction. Now, when we have a situation where the assessment level may be higher than the statutory level or lower, the way we rectify this is through the equalization process. Now, what is equalization? Equalization ensures the uniform and equitable distribution of the property tax burden amongst taxpayers within a given jurisdiction. That's the textbook answer. However, I'm hoping that this example that we go through here quickly helps clarify that a little bit. In this example, we have 3 homes. They're all worth $100,000. So sign in the yard, they're all sold tomorrow for $100,000. They're also all in the same taxing district, and that is noted by the dashed line around all 3 properties. Now, the median assessment level in Township A is 28%. It is a little underassessed. The median township level the median assessment level, in Township C is 38%. They're a little overassessed. The median assessment level in Township B is right on the dot at 33 1/3%. So if we see the corresponding tax payments to the tax district, now remember, these are all properties that are equal in value. The fair cash value is all the same. They're all in the same taxing district. However, the amount of money they're going to pay to that taxing district in an unequalized state is dramatically different, where home number 3 in Township C is going to pay roughly or almost $84 more than the home in Township A. Obviously, those values are going to increase dramatically when we look at a taxing district that has a higher tax rate or if assessed values are increased. So how do we rectify that situation? We do that by applying an equalization factor. So all non-farm property in Township A would receive an equalization factor of 1.1094 to increase that assessed value to the median assessment level. All non-farm property in Township C would receive an equalization factor of 0.8771 to lower the median assessment level to the statutory requirement of 33 1/3%. As we mentioned, Township B is spot on, and they would receive an equalization factor of 1, which would equate to no adjustment. The end result, as you can see, is that all properties, all equal in value, all receiving the same services from that taxing district that they're paying into, are all paying the same amount of money. We have an equitable and uniform assessment in the jurisdictions at this point. So why are assessed values increasing? The simple answer is assessed value is driven primarily by equalization. And equalization is driven by sales, and more specifically, residential sales. As we all know, we are in an unprecedented housing market. Due to low inventory, prices have been increasing dramatically, and that has put upward pressure on assessed values. In this chart, we can see the countywide equalized assessed value, and this would fairly mirror the housing market. It's important to note that the median assessment is calculated using 3 years of sales. So assessed values are a lagging indicator behind the market. That's done intentionally in the property tax code to allow for those sudden spikes to theoretically be smoothed out a little bit so taxing districts can budget a little bit easier. As you can see, in 2015, we hit the low point after the housing market crisis of 08-09 at $4.2 billion in assessed value. We have since that time, through 2022, regained 40% of that assessed value to put us where we are at through 2022 at $5.7 billion. Now, 2023 is not up here right now, and the reason that is because we're in the middle of the assessment year. The 2023 assessment year will not be finished until the Board of Review finishes their work in March of 2024. However, assessed values countywide increased 11.3% for the 2023 assessment year. Now, again, that's prior to any action by the Board of Review or the Illinois Department of Revenue. Generally speaking, anywhere from 1/4 to 0.5% of value is eroded or reduced at the Board of Review level through the appeal process. So we'll see where that number lands come March. However, any way you slice it, we're going to be well over $6 billion in assessed value for 2023. Now, assessed values obviously are very important and play a very important role in calculating individual taxpayers' liability. However, they are only one part of the equation. We also need to look at tax rates. Now, I'm using the tax rate for tax code 001 here. Tax code 001 is the largest tax code in the county. Roughly 38% of all tax parcels in the county come from tax code 001, and it's a pretty good representation of the change in tax rates that we're seeing in other tax codes throughout the county. Again, you can see the tax rate peaked in 2015 for tax code 001 at 15.3%, corresponding to that low point of equalized assessed value in 2015. Since then, we've been seeing tax rates come back down. There's two primary reasons for that. One, obviously, is the increase in assessed value that we've been seeing. Also, is due to our larger tax districts in the county holding their levies flat or holding them close to flat. A lot of our larger taxing districts have made a concerted effort to do so, led by Winnebago County. Again, assessed values increase, tax rates decrease, and assessed values go down, tax rates need to come up. This chart just kind of shows that a little bit in more detail of the inverse proportion of the tax rate and the equalized assessed value. Looking closer at an individual taxing district, this is Winnebago County's taxable value from 2011, 2015, 2019, and 2022. The taxable value in 2011 decreased by 4.29%, excuse me. The tax rate then increased 4.54%. In 2015, taxable value dropped 1.3%. Tax rate increased, again, 1.3%. For the sake of brevity, I'll just go through these next couple of years. But really one of the main takeaways that I want to emphasize tonight is, when our taxpayers received their assessment notices a couple of weeks ago, and it had an 11.88% increase or a 9.5% increase, that increase in and of itself cannot be equated as a direct one-to-one correlation with what their tax bill is going to increase when they get it in the mail next May. Our job and what we've been busy with in the Supervisor of Assessments office the past few weeks is educating taxpayers the best we can on that. This chart simply shows the Winnebago County tax extension over the past 12 years. I found it interesting that in 2010, the tax extension for Winnebago County was $38 million. 12 years later, it is at in 2022, it was at $40.3 million. That's an increase of only 6.43%. And much of that increase in the extension can be almost all of that increase can be directly attributed to new growth. Conversely, if we look at the consumer price index over that same period of time, consumer price index obviously being the leading metric used to track inflation, the CPI over the same amount of time has risen 34.2%. So again, I think it speaks to the fiscal responsibility by the county over that period. I added this slide simply to show the relative proportion of tax dollars that come into the county on any given tax bill. Again, we see Winnebago County's 2022 tax rate of 0.8373. That equates to a percentage of a total tax bill in tax code 001 of only 7.33%. So what do taxpayers, or what should they do if they feel like they are being overassessed? First of all, they need to talk to their township assessor. Their township assessor can go over their property record card with them and review that, ensure that they are being assessed on what they actually own. After that, if they are still not satisfied, they can file a formal complaint with the Winnebago County Board of Review. Once the Board of Review renders a decision, the taxpayer will have 30 days to appeal that decision to the Property Tax Appeal Board with the state of Illinois, or file a tax objection in circuit court. And Property Tax Appeal Board decisions are subject to administrative review in circuit court. That's all that I really have tonight, but I would be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Butita?
Thank you, Mr. Hodges. Great presentation. Can you make that available to us?
Absolutely.
Because I think that would,
I send the PowerPoint out to.
great, because a lot of questions are coming at us, and this will be a very helpful tool.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
I am, Ms. Squirrel, sorry.
I just want to thank you. My daughter called you in office, and she says she never seen a woman so polite on the telephone and sent her all the information that she had to follow. So you have it online too, don't you?
We do, all the forms.
Explain that also.
Absolutely.
For those who want to, or have constituents who want to file a complaint, you might want to explain that to them about getting it online.
Absolutely. That's a great idea, Mrs. Gorel. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Arena?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hodges, so when we get a call from a constituent who received an assessment, and the assessment went up 10%, and we're telling them, well, that doesn't mean your taxes are going up 10%, can we give them some idea of how much their taxes will go up or go down based on a 10% increase in assessment? Or if not today, when can we tell them what their how it affects their taxes?
So that's a great question, Mr. Arena. The only way that we would be able to provide any sort of guesstimate would be looking at historical changes in their specific tax code, because at this point, that's all it would be, is a guesstimate. When taxing districts submit their levies by December 31st to the county clerk's office, and the Board of Review finishes their work in March, at that point, Clerk Gumau's office would extend the taxes, and that's really when the tax rate is created. So without having all the taxing districts within that tax code, their levies and the extensions worked out, we're really not going to know what the corresponding change in tax rate will be until the spring of, in this case, 2024.
So is it possible that they'd see a 10% increase in their taxes?
No. So so taxing districts are required to follow the property tax extension limitation law, or PTEL, that caps the change in aggregate extension that a taxing district can have by the CPI, year-over-year CPI, or 5%. Obviously, with CPI going bonkers the last couple of years, it is capped at 5%. However, I don't see any possible way that that their actual tax bill, and unless they lost some homestead exemptions, or if there was a new improvement on their property, something along those lines. But simply equating the assessed value to their property tax liability it's going to be way off.
So did you just say that the most their taxes could go up is 5%?
No, so it's not an individual tax cap. It's a tax. It's a cap on the taxing district and how much they can raise their property tax levy. They can only raise it by either the CPI year over year, or in this case, 5%. And the majority of the larger taxing districts in the county have been keeping their levies flat, Winnebago County included. And for instance, in Rockford Township, and I can provide this information as well. So in tax code 001, Rockford Township last year got an increase of 9% and some change. And the property tax liability for the majority of the individuals in that township only went up anywhere from 1 to 2%. It was significantly less than that 9%.
So I'm asking all these questions because people are calling me up
Sure.
very anxious.
Right.
I'm just trying to figure out some way to give them a basic answer to settle them down. But it sounds like there's no way to do that.
I can certainly bullet point some thoughts and send them out, some short answers that should hopefully alleviate their concerns. We've been dealing with taxpayers and their concerns, in large numbers over the past few weeks, and the majority, if not almost all of them, after you take the time to kind of explain the process and to empathize and sympathize with them, they seem to get it. I have an email that I've been responding to. I'd be happy to provide that to the board, which kind of explains the process a little bit and really does alleviate a lot of their concerns. At least we've been seeing that it has.
All right, thank you. I
You're
appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Arena. Mr. McCarthy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Hodges, wonderful presentation. So really, we won't know whether it be either of our homes or our neighbors or in the county until, if I heard you correctly, until May of next year, exactly what the assessed value of the home is going to be and what our property tax bill will be at that point.
That's almost all correct. So the assessed value of the property, unless it's reduced at the board review level, is what the assessed value is going to be on the 2023 tax bill. However, we will not know what the tax rate is until all the taxing districts submit their budgets and those taxes are extended based on the total value within that district.
And that would be in the May timeframe.
It would be, usually that's available, and Clerk Gummow can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's usually available in April at some point. It's not always open for public consumption at that point because we are waiting at that point for the Illinois Department of Revenue to certify their final multiplier to Clerk Gummow's office, and if we do our job correctly, that should always be a 1, and there will be no change, but they can't extend taxes until they have that certification from the state of Illinois.
Okay.
So April of next year is the short answer.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
Mr. Webster?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for your explanations here. So what I'm getting then is because your assessment goes up 10%, I'm using that round number, that doesn't mean your tax bill is going to go up 10%.
Exactly.
And so is there a cap, though, between that assessment and the actual tax bill? In other words, my assessment goes up 10%, my tax bill, I should expect it to go somewhere 10% or less?
It should be definitely less because that 10% increase, all the taxing districts that a property is within, they're seeing that increase in their assessed value. If they don't take that assessed value, that additional assessed value, then, and they hold their levies flat, the tax rate would be inversely or closely inversely proportional to the increase in assessed value.
Okay. Thank you. One more. Can you tell me how someone building a new home next to you or across the street or whatever, how does that affect the assessment on your home?
That's a great question. So township assessors and all assessors are, they utilize mass appraisal techniques to assess property. Okay, they can't sales chase. Now, if that home, that new construction, until that new construction is sold, so once it's built by a building company and it's sold, if that's an arm's length transaction as specified on the real estate transfer declaration, it would be put into the sales ratio study. So that one particular sale would be used, would be put in the list of all the sales ratios, and it would affect everything appropriately or accordingly. It's just one sale of many. So it's not going to directly, now if you have a lot of homes in your area that are selling for, well, and that's why we're seeing assessed values go up, is because we're seeing home prices go up, and that's raising everybody's assessed values because the market dictates the increase. So it's not going to directly, one new home next to you is not going to directly affect you. It's just going to be one of many put into mass appraisal techniques that the township assessor is going to use to derive a value for your home.
And so how would they calculate it if a new home is built by someone and they occupy that home, they're living there, they're not going to sell that home, so you're telling me that it goes by the price of the home that's sold, but now if it's not sold, but it's a new home sitting there, then how do they?
Yeah, that sale in and of, or since there's no sale, now a lot of times the builder will take title to a home and build it and then sell it. So we see the actual cost of the home at that point. But in cases where I have a parcel of land and I've been waiting, I build it myself, and it's never conveyed.
Right.
It's not going to directly affect your property next door until it's actually conveyed and it goes into the sales ratio study.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the last I have.
Thank you, Mr. Webster.
I'm going to go to Ms. Gorel and then Mr. Penny.
From that is where your deductions come down, make it come down.
That is correct.
I think that needs to be explained. Like, I have the senior freeze,
Sure.
so what's gonna happen to me? Hardly any movement at all.
None at all.
So we need to explain that to our constituents also, that the assessed value, then that will take off their home occupied taxes. If they're a veteran, take that off. And so that's gonna bring that tax down. And you have to, because what they're looking at is the top part, and then the deductions start coming off.
Correct.
And if you look at your tax bill, you will see all the deductions that can happen. And if you just ask them, do you have a deduction for this, or do you have this? Then you can also explain to them that their taxes will be coming down. They won't be at the assessed value.
Absolutely, and that's an important part, and we're seeing that with a lot of our conversations with those with the senior citizen assessment freeze. They are getting the benefit of their assessed values being frozen, but they're also going to be getting the benefit of those tax rates dropping. So their property tax bills are actually most likely going to go down.
Now, I got all excited when I saw what my house is worth now.
Thank you. Mr. Penny?
Yeah, kind of building off of what Mr. Webster was saying with improvements or new homes that go up alongside of a house. What about with like acts of God and natural disasters? So I'm in one of the neighborhoods in the county that got hit with hail. And so you look and every other house is getting a new roof or new siding and new windows and all this stuff at the expense of insurance. Sure. How does that affect the assessments? Because I've gotten probably 2 phone calls on that so far, and if you could break that down a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Penny. Roofing, siding, windows are all considered maintenance, and they do not affect the assessed value. Now, however, if in a case of a fire or if there's water damage, they should definitely be contacting their township assessor. That township assessor can go out and look at the property. And then what we can do is we can adjust. The property tax code allows us, in the case of, let's say an example, a fire, the property tax code allows us to adjust and prorate the assessed value for that year to the date of destruction. You're welcome.
The other thing
Thank
that
you.
affects that too is that if they do have a fire and they decide, well, as long as we're doing this, why don't we just add another room onto the house? Then your taxes will go up because you have to, they go by the footprint, the original footprint. And so as long as you don't add anything to that footprint, then you're usually pretty good on it.
Correct. Yep.
Any other questions for Mr. Hodges? All right, thank you, Mr. Hodges.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to move on to public participation. I'm going to read a short comment. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers may not address zoning matters which are pending before the ZBA, zoning committee, or the county board. Personnel matters or pending or threatened litigation may not be addressed in open session. An individual may speak a maximum of 3 times per calendar year on the same topic. This prohibition shall include the repetition of the same topic in a statement on what is purported to be a different topic. Personal attacks or inappropriate language of any sort will not be tolerated. So our first speaker is Mr. Denzel Winter.
Good afternoon,
Good.
County Board. My name is Denzel Winter, and I am a grandfather, a father, and a great-grandfather. And I have been watching my neighborhood, my community, and I've seen some stuff that I don't think is right. You know, young fellas leaving the Browns Park, and they're being stopped and detained for no reason. And you can see that the boys are just coming from playing basketball. Now, there's been a lot of things going on that's we're trying to get these kids to trust police officers, and if we keep letting this happen, these kids are not going to trust the police officers, because they're going to wonder why are they getting stopped every time they come away from that park. And all they've done was play basketball. Now, this is not what somebody has told me. I have observed that. And I can tell you, you know, there's no reason that we can't, as a community, do something for these kids that would make them understand that the police, the sheriff department aren't against them. But if they keep getting stopped like that, then what do we do to make these kids understand? One of the things, Madam told me, Brother Booker, I want to get with you one of these days and see if we can go over some stuff that we can get with the kids, like the RMPD do, to make sure that they understand that you guys are not out there to hurt them. You're not out there to give them a hard time. But see, if every time they turn around and they on their way home from playing basketball, you can see all the sweat rolling off of them. They're gonna wonder, well, why are they messing with me? I ain't did anything. All I did was go to the park.
Mr.
Like I
Wick-
said, I'm a grandfather, And I got a chance this year to go watch my grandkids play baseball.
Mr. Winter, your 3 minutes are up.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll get with you. I'll get with you.
Thank you. Next is Michael Mostow, speaking on the amendment of ordinance 2018 CO 92.
Good evening. My name is Michael Mostow. I'm an attorney at Quarles and Brady, and I serve as common counsel to the Acme RDRA group. In the 1960s and early 70s, members of the group were customers of Acme Solvent Reclaiming, which was located in Rockford. Unknown to the group members, Acme Solvent disposed of wastes from its Rockford operations at the property on Lindenwood Road, which became the Acme Solvent Superfunds site. Because Acme Solvent became insolvent, the United States Environmental Protection Agency looked to Acme's customers, including the members of the group, to clean up the soil and groundwater contaminated by Acme Solvent's operations. Over the last 30 years, the group has addressed the impacts in accordance with the United States Environmental Protection Agency consent decree. In 2022, the group asked the county to amend Ordinance 2018 CO 092 to no longer prohibit potable wells screened in the Ironton Aquifer at specific locations that are covered by the ordinance. Since this time, the group has attended committee meetings to help ensure that the facts relative to the Acme site and the group are accurately represented. The amendment before the board is not the amendment that the group sought. Nevertheless, if passed, the amended ordinance, among other things, would no longer prohibit potable wells screened in the Ironton Aquifer at the locations requested by the group. The group also notes that the exhibit affiliated with the amendment does not reflect the language of the amendment. The exhibit incorrectly shows parcel 1631326.004 as subject to section 2 of the ordinance, and the exhibit does not show that parcel 1631400.003 is subject to section 2 of the ordinance. Furthermore, the exhibit incorrectly depicts the water line, and the exhibit name is incorrect because it implies that the water line is owned by the Winnebago Landfill Company. The group is the sole owner of the entire water line. Last, the water line is irrelevant to the ordinance. Therefore, the group requests that the board correct the exhibit by removing the depiction of the water line and making the changes noted above. I have a handout that makes these changes. At the August 17th, 2023 Operations and Administrative Committee meeting, the group objected to being singled out in the amendment's fourth whereas clause as a source of potential groundwater contamination in the area. That objection stands. In all other respects, the group has no comments. If the board has any questions, I will try to answer them to the extent I'm able. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And handout.
Okay, we'll move on. May I entertain a motion to approve the minutes of July 27th, 2023, and lay over the August 10th, 2023 minutes? Motion by Mr. Guevara. Is there a second? Mr. Thompson seconds that motion. Is there any discussion of the approval or layover of the minutes? All right, hearing none. Are there any board members opposed to the approval and layover? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Next is consent agenda. May I entertain a motion for the approve the consent agenda for the raffle report and the auditor's report? We have a motion by Mr. Webster, second by Mr. Booker. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to the consent agenda this evening? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Next is the appointments per county board rules. Board chairman appointments require a 30-day layover unless there is a suspension of the rule. Tonight is for the ETSB board. The annual compensation is none. Placing up Mark Gasparini is a new appointment for this term of April 30th, 2023. to April 30th, 2026. Next is the reports of standing committees. Finance Committee, Mr. Butita.
Okay, first of all, we have an ordinance to be read in, an ordinance to provide public transportation in rural areas of Winnebago County, and that is to be laid over.
Very good.
Next, we have a resolution awarding grant writing services to the Ferguson Group, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Butita. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Webster. Any discussion, Mr. Butita, on your end?
No, sir.
Any board member discussion on the grant writer services? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. Butita.
Thank you. So we have 5 ordinances from old business.
Yep, we'll
Take
move
those up now.
to unfinished business under Finance Committee.
Okay. First, we have an ordinance for a budget amendment to provide funds for the Winnebago County Highway Department for the Riverside Boulevard multi-use path study, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Butita, second by Mr. Guevara. Is there any discussion on this ordinance? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to passage of this ordinance? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. Butita.
All right, next we have an ordinance for a budget amendment to fund the Boys and Girls Club fire alarm system, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Butita, second by Mr. Sweeney. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Are there any board members opposed to this ordinance? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr.
All right.
Butita.
Next, we have an ordinance for a budget amendment to provide funds for the Boys and Girls Club new HVAC system, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Butita, second by Mr. Limhart. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this ordinance? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Butita.
All right, next we have an ordinance for a budget amendment to fund Zion West Enterprise van purchase, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Butita, second by Ms. Hansert. Is there any discussion on this ordinance? Good. Are there any board members opposed to the passage of this ordinance? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Butita.
And the last one is an ordinance for a budget amendment to fund carpet purchase for Intercity Reconstruction Group, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Butita, second by Ms. Hansert. Is any discussion? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to this ordinance? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. Butita.
That's all we have this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Butita. So we'll go back to the regular agenda for the zoning committee. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. Your zoning committee has 4 items on the agenda this evening. The first 3 are in for a layover. The 4th one we will be voting on. So number 1 is resolution granting site approval of a commercial solar facility. This is North Conger Road in Pecatonica Township. For the record, it is PIN number 0934200008 and 0934200010. The second is a resolution awarding, or authorizing, the DC Estate Winery, 8877 State Line Road, be subject to the jurisdiction of the City of South Beloit pursuant to pre-annexation agreements. The third one is a resolution directing the Zoning Board of Appeals to conduct a public hearing on certain unified development ordinances amendments regarding commercial wind, power, and solar. That's to be laid over as well. Finally, number 4 is a resolution authorizing the chairman of the county board to execute an intergovernmental cooperation agreement for building inspection by and between the County of Winnebago and the Village of New Milford. And I would move that item.
Move to approve by Mr. Webster, second by Speaker McCarthy. Is there any discussion?
No, not on my part, unless
Any board
Bush
members
has
discussion?
anything to add, I'm okay.
Mr. Chris is good. Board member discussion? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present.
Thank you, that's all we have.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Next is Economic Development Committee, Mr. John Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have no report tonight, but we will convene a meeting this upcoming Monday at 5:30 in the admin building,
Very good.
5th floor. I'm sorry, 3rd floor.
Next is Operation Administrative Committee, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this is highly unusual, but would it be okay to move my committee to the end?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move Operation Administrative Committee to the end of the meeting. So up next is the Public Works Committee, Mr. Tassoni.
Pardon?
Good evening, board members. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a handful of items this evening for your Public Works Committee. First item on the agenda is Resolution 23-029. It's a resolution authorizing an agreement between the County of Winnebago and the City of Rockford for repairs at the intersection of Riverside Boulevard and Central Avenue. And I would so move and speak to any one of these as necessary.
Moved by Mr. Sassoni, second by Mr. Hoffman. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to approval of this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item is Resolution 23-030. It's a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental grant agreement with the State of Illinois Emergency Management Agency for flood mitigation on Winnebago Road. I would so move.
Moved by Mr. Tassoni, seconded by Mr. Webster. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Webster, I thought you had your... Very good. Is there any board member discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item is Resolution 23-031. It's a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental cooperation agreement between the County of Winnebago and the City of Rockford for the jurisdictional transfer of Lindenwood Road, and I would so move.
Moved by Mr. Tassoni, second by Mr. Speaker McCarthy. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item is Resolution 23-032, and it's a resolution authorizing the execution of a development agreement between the County of Winnebago and Rockford, DG LLC, for improvements to Lindenwood Road, and I would so move.
Moved by Mr. Tassoni, seconded by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion on this resolution? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item is Resolution 23-033, and it's a resolution authorizing the award of bid for 2023 HMA patching program, and I would move and speak to that as well.
Mr. Tassoni moves, and second by Mr. Guevara. Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would motion to amend as read, and after a second, I would read in the changes.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. You said
I would motion to amend.
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Tassoni to amend, second by Mr. Guevara. Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where does 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth paragraph down, I would like to change the language, remove desires and replace with does not wish. And 6th paragraph down, where it says totals of $265,831.44. I would like to replace that with $99,381.26. And likewise, the paragraph under replace the language of $265,000 with the $99,381.26.
Very good. Is there any discussion on the amendments for this resolution? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to the amendments to this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Tassoni.
Then I would like for approval of the original motion.
Moved by Mr. Tassoni, second by Mr. Penny, as amended resolution. Is there any discussion? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to this amended resolution? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item is Resolution 23-034. It's a resolution authorizing the appropriation of RBI funds, Rebuild Illinois, for the resurfacing of Best Road, and I would so move.
Moved by Mr. Tassoni, second by Mr. Lindmark. Mr. Webster. Any discussion on this resolution? Very good. Is there any board members opposed to the approval of this resolution? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. Tassoni.
Our final resolution, 23-035, will be sent back to committee.
23035, resolution is being sent back to committee. All right, thank you.
That concludes the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tassoni. Public Safety and Judiciary Committee, Mr. Lindmark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Lindmark. Okay, brings us back to the Operation Administrative Committee. Is that, you have time?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To make sure this is right, as you heard earlier, this has been going on for well over a year. I would like to make a motion to recess for no more than 10 minutes, so that way both parties can spend time with the state's attorney to make sure this is proper before we bring it forward.
Very good. So you want to recess the entire meeting?
If we can recess, allow us a few minutes, maybe several minutes, no more than 10, and then we'll reconvene this meeting.
Very good. I'll grant the recess. Very good.
We have to vote on,
We need
sir?
a vote on that, correct? Okay. Motion by Mr. McDonald, second by Mr. Guevara, to recess the board meeting. Clerk, can you call the roll?
Mr. Thompson? Still here. Mr. Webster?
You need a yes or no, sir? Yes or no?
Yes or no, Mr. Thompson?
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Arena? Mr. Booker? Mr. Butita? Ms. Fellers? Ms. Gorel? Mr. Guevara? Ms. Hansard?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman? Mr. Lindmark? Mr. McCarthy? Mr. McDonald? Mr. Penny? Mr. Scroll? Mr. Sweeney?
Yep.
Mr. Tassoni? Thank you all, Chairman. That is 17 yes, 3 board members absent.
Very good. We are in recess. We will see you in 10 minutes, prompt.
enough information. I'm curious about a lot of other things. I did attend the operations meeting here 4, 6, 8 weeks ago. It was mentioned, there was some discussion that there was going to be some information or some consensus from the state of Illinois as far as what their input may or may not be out there. And I just don't have enough information to make a conscious, educated decision. That's no more than that.
Thank you, Mr. Tassoni. Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as a member of the Operations Committee, I was, involved in that discussion and the whole evolution of this to where we're at today. When this was first brought to us with the proposal to just rescind it, I think at that time, Mr. McDonald suggested, let's just follow the restrictions imposed by the EPA. And it's my understanding that that's what this ordinance does. So for those of you who are unsure, we are just providing the same, matching the EPA's restriction. And the question was asked in committee, if the EPA changes what they're restricting, then we could follow up and amend again to just continue to follow the EPA. And for the two parties who have been in opposition over an extended period of time, they did acknowledge in committee that they're in agreement, that they're both satisfied. Both the Acme Solvents Group and the Gun Club and the landfill are all satisfied with what's happened. So I just wanted to provide that to.
Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just if we can get some guidance from our state's attorney's office here, are we incurring any liability by approving this?
Ms. Vaughn.
Thank you, Chairman. Unfortunately, I cannot answer that question. I expressed that committee that we don't know what the impact this will have on the county if something were to happen. We did reach out to the US EPA and the EPA for their opinion on amending the ordinance or rescinding it. They did not want us to rescind it in its entirety. And in regards to amending it, they eventually said they don't have any opinion. They did let us know which parcels or PIN numbers had restrictive covenants on them or will soon have restrictive covenants placed on them, but we don't know what impact this will have.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Any other questions? Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've learned a lot of new big words going through this. This has been like a year and a half we've been working on it. I'm not a geologist. I've met several of them now. It's kind of neat stuff, actually. The point of my story is I'm not smart enough to say yes or no on this, what they can or cannot do. I trust the Illinois EPA and I trust the federal EPA to be able to have a better judge than, no offense, but all of us in this room, unless one of you is a geologist and I don't know it. That's the reason I support this, is because it gets it off of us. If the only thing stopping somebody from moving forward is the county ordinance, we don't have the schooling to enforce that. I would rather put on somebody who is better trained to say yes or no. Thank you.
Mr. McDonald. Yes. Ms. Gorel.
I'm on the board of the Health Department. And we did, before, when we did this a while back, several years ago, we took into consideration a whole lot of things. That we also went according to, we just can't do these things without going to the Illinois EPA and the federal EPA. It has to go through them. We follow their guidelines. When we made this ordinance, we did it under their guidelines. And it should not be changed because you don't know the hazard that could happen. And yes, if it happens right, yes, we can be responsible because we rescinded what was done because we did it the right way to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gorel. Mr. Guevara.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To clarify, we're not rescinding an ordinance. We're reflecting the current version of the Illinois EPA's standard.
Thank you, Chairman. We're amending our ordinance from 2018. We are not rescinding it. The US EPA and IEPA are willing to review any plans or specs that are submitted when the wells are installed. But yes, it's just an amendment, not a rescission.
Thank you, Mr. Guevara. Mr. Lindmark had his hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering, you spoke of the geologist Mr. McDonald,
the other
close enough. They did, I take it, do a study, and did the health department do one, Angie, do you know, several years ago? If so, what changed in this time?
Mr. McDonald?
I have a layman's term, or layman's knowledge of this. From what I understand, it was asked of us to throw a blanket over, and Ms. Vaughn, please correct me if I'm misspeaking, but we were asked to throw a blanket over the entire area. Now we're learning that, okay, maybe that large of an area does not have to have the blanket over it. Is that accurate, Ms. Vaughn?
In layman's terms, yes.
Good job, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Arena, and then Mr. Scroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to the concerns that Ms. Gorel raised, it was suggested that somehow we're acting contrary to what the EPA has dictated here, to their covenants. What we're trying to achieve here is to match the same restrictions that the EPA has imposed. So that was our goal in this, all through the negotiations on this. I just want that to be clear for all the board members. Thank you.
Mr. Scroll, thank you.
I had a question. EPA approval. I heard a couple different comments here. They haven't signed off on this? They simply have no opinion of it? Or did they actually sign off on this and approve it?
Ms. Vaughn?
Thank you, Chairman. No, they did not sign off on this amended ordinance. They expressed to us which PIN numbers have covenants and which ones will soon have covenants, which is in the ordinance, that language that they gave us. They also revised Section 2 of the ordinance, and we agreed to that language as well. So they did have some input, but they didn't say, we approve of everything in your ordinance. They just made some changes.
Do they typically do that?
That I don't know. This is my first go-around with this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scroll. Ms. Gorel, you wanted to?
Dr. Martell's here. Why don't we have her explain it?
Dr. Martell, did you want to make a comment, or no? No, she says no. All right, Mr. Arena.
Thank you for allowing me to speak again. Mr. Scroll, it's my understanding, I wasn't a participant when the ordinance was first passed, but it wasn't done at the direction of the EPA. It was done at the request of the Acme Solvents Group. So we weren't acting to satisfy the EPA, and I think that's why they don't feel that they have any reason to control what we do. I'm guessing that maybe that's why they don't feel a need to sign off on it either.
Mr. Scroll.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry, I did not hear the statement.
So what I had said is the original ordinance in 2018 was done at the request of the Acme Solvents Group. It wasn't mandated by the EPA. The EPA wasn't directing us to do it originally, and they provided input, but we're not doing this we never did this to satisfy the EPA, so I believe it is for that reason the EPA doesn't feel that it's necessary for them to approve what we're doing here.
Thank you, Chairman. I do not know the reason. I don't want to speculate what the USCPA or IEPA thinks. But Dr. Martell can give more of the history or a brief history of the 2018 ordinance. But yeah, I just don't want to speculate why they have the current position that they have. But they have been looped in for the past year or two.
Dr. Martell, brief statement.
So I want to be clear that the 2018 ordinance was the result of, correctly, that Acme Solvents came to us, but it was in the record of decision as filed by the EPA that there should be local covenants placed on that property and those pins. So in reviewing it, we don't typically allow companies to come in and ask us to pass ordinances. So we looked at the original, what they called record of decision, and that's where the Board of Health first considered it to take a look at protecting that area under the groundwater ordinance.
Thank you, Dr. Martell. Any follow-up, Mr. Arena?
So, Dr. Martell, in your opinion, does the ordinance that's before us and the restrictions that we're imposing align with the covenants imposed by the EPA?
We have reviewed it, and we believe that with the US EPA and the IPA having to approve any wells drilled in those areas, in the restricted areas that are not included in the covenants, would be under their authority. And if you look at the draft document from May, there was a briefing document shared with operations, we're very clear that we believe it is the decision of the US EPA regarding any drilling in those areas.
So that would still be managed by them and not by us?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martell. Any further comments or questions? Ms. Goro.
Dr. Martell, if I remember correctly, one of the reasons we had to do that is because there was some vacant land there, and we did not want any new construction being done in that particular area, especially of homes. Because at one time it had been platted, and because of that, we wanted to make sure that no homes were being built on that or anything else on that property because of its being so right on top of the landfill. And I think that's the other one of the reasons that we came out and decided, to do this ordinance also. But they also checked to see how we could do it through the Illinois IPA. I mean, we just didn't go and say, Dad, we're gonna do this. We don't do that because you have to remember, we run under the jurisdiction of the Illinois Health Department, the EPA, and the same thing with the federal. We just don't make decisions on our own. We have to make sure we follow the rules so we don't get in trouble.
Mr. Lindmark, thank you.
Yeah, I kind of take offense to that comment, Angie. I don't think anyone did anything on their own. They had geologists out and everything else. So I don't think they just decided we're going to allow drilling.
Thank you. Any further board member discussion? Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could direct this question to Dr. Martell here. So if this is amended or reworded, what would be the requirements of the health department to issue a permit for a drilled well in these areas?
We would not issue the permit. It would go through the Illinois EPA and the US EPA because there are very specific requirements to drill in that particular area.
So we'd be exonerated from the permitting process?
Correct.
Good, thank you. Any further board member discussion on the amended ordinance before you? All right, hearing none, are there any board members opposed to the amended ordinance? We got Ms. Goro. Well, I'm going to do a roll call here. Clerk, can you call the roll?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. Webster. Yes. Mr. Arena. Yes. Mr. Booker. Yes. Mr. Butita. Yes. Ms. Fellers. No. Mrs. Gorel. No. Mr. Gravera. Yes. Ms. Hansard. No. Mr. Hoffman. No. Mr. Lindmark. Yes. Mr. McCarthy. Yes. Mr. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Penny. Yes. Mr. Scroll. No. Mr. Sweeney. Yes. Mr. Tassoni. Yes. Mr. Thompson. Yes. Mr. Chairman, that's 12 yes, 5 no, and 3 board members absent.
Very good. The ordinance has been approved. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That already concludes the report.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Okay, moving on to new business. Is there any new business in front of the board this evening? Very good. Announcements and communications. Clerk Gummow.
Thank you, Chairman. The items listed below were received as correspondence.
Thank you, Clerk Gummow. Mr. Webster, motions to adjourn, second by Mr. Thompson, Mr. Guevara, and the rest of the board. All in favor of adjournment, say yes. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.